Hello, and welcome back to the AusCannaPodcast, where patient voices, policy, and cannabis reform come together. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today's conversation is an important one. Cannabis reform in Australia is no longer a fringe conversation. What was once pushed to the sidelines is now being debated in Parliament, discussed by doctors, challenged in courtrooms, and increasingly supported by everyday Australians who believe our current approach simply isn't working anymore. Because behind every policy debate, every roadside drug test, every medicinal cannabis prescription, and every cannabis arrest statistic, there are real people trying to navigate a system that, for many, no longer reflects modern science, public health, or even common sense. And today's guest has seen all of this firsthand from inside the legal system. I'm joined by Miles Hunt, a lawyer, activist, and co-founder of Unharm Australia, an organization focused on harm minimization, evidence-based drug policy, pill testing advocacy, and cannabis law reform. Miles also recently ran for the Senate as a candidate for the Legalised Cannabis Party in New South Wales, campaigning for cannabis legalization, stronger protections for medicinal cannabis patients, and a broader shift away from prohibition-based drug policy. As a lawyer, he's represented Australians charged with cannabis offenses and has seen firsthand how criminalisation impacts everyday people, especially young Australians and medicinal cannabis patients who are often stuck navigating conflicting and confusing laws. And that's what makes this conversation so important, because this isn't just about cannabis anymore. It's about healthcare, it's about justice, it's about evidence-based policy. And ultimately, it's about whether Australia is ready to rethink a system that many people believe is causing more harm than good. So today, we're diving into cannabis reform, medicinal cannabis driving laws, politics, harm minimization, the future of drug policy in Australia, and what meaningful reform could actually look like moving forward. But before we get into all of that, let's kick things off with the not so rapid fire question segment. All right, so are you ready, sir?
Sure.
Let's do this. A book everyone should read.
Oh, easy. On the Road.
By
Jack Kerouac. The beat, the beats in the 1950s. I love them because they were the precursor to the hippie movement. In essence, wandering around the US, traveling, just living in the moment, taking drugs as well, but I love Kerouac's style of writing, like jazz, and he's just, he's got this great quote in that book. The only ones for me are the mad ones: mad to live, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at one time. So, I always like that thing, the mad ones.
I love it. Music you listen to when stressed.
I like Bob Dylan, but I also started to get into electronic music. So, like Nicola Cruz or Thievery Corporation as well is cool. But I'm a bit of an old school, Beatles and Bob Dylan sort of character.
I like Thievery Corporation. They're awesome.
Yeah. Especially with a bit of cannabis too,
Ah, yes. I like it when they did the collaboration with, what was it, Massive Attack?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Love it. Okay. Gotta stay focused. What's something people misunderstand about you?
Misunderstand. I don't know. It's a good question. That's a tough one. You're getting me here. I have to ask them, really. Maybe whether or not, I suppose, when I was a kid, there was a bit of they didn't know if I was bright or not very bright because I struggled a bit at school. That was a good one. These days, whether I guess when you're a public advocate for cannabis reform, whether you're promoting, I guess that's a big one, whether you're promoting drug use, and I'm a drug law reform advocate as a lawyer, first and foremost. I think everyone should do whatever they want in terms of, civil liberties, in terms of what they're going to ingest, as long as they're not hurting anyone. But I certainly don't promote drug use, and even though I've taken it and had benefits, I think it's not for everyone, and when you need to be careful when you're advocating that you draw the line between seeing the benefits and trying to decry the failures of prohibition and supported the drug that's been maligned, like cannabis, or a plant that's been maligned and has so many health benefits, but also not be seen to be just advocating everyone to be using it all the time.
I agree. It's a fine line to walk for sure.
You would know, and same for you, I suppose, Christina, who to do that.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy just how fine that line is at times, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, Most inspiring person you've met.
Well, I met Ethan Nadelman up at the MardiGrass festival. He was pretty. When Will Tregoning and I set up Unharm, which is like a drug law reform organization, 10, 15 years ago, he was our inspiration. Like, we were like watching him talk. I'm going, hey, this guy's amazing. He's just the way he speaks about drug law reform. So that was cool.
I was gonna say, yeah, he was I only caught the tail end of his talk there in Nimbin, but it was so good that I've low key put out feelers to see if I can get him on the show.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if people are interested, if you go to the Nimbin Mardi Gras Facebook page, they have all the lectures online there, so you can find his, which is worth a listen.
Yeah, like I said, I caught the last little bit of it, and it was so, everything that he was talking about, I was like, yes, sir, yes, sir. This is so like on point, I guess, is what I like. It was unreal, just everything that he was talking about and how change happens and how reform happens. And I was like, man, this guy has got some good talking points for sure.
Yeah, man, they're so crucial for like the reform in the States, and you got to and you probably understand this more than me, but like America was the perpetuator of the war on drugs, and then to take them into like legalization of cannabis, that's a pretty massive or important, contribution to the world.
This is going to age me a little bit, just a snoochie booch, but I was in grade 5 and I was part of the very first like initial year that Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan kicked off their what was it, DARE, Drug Awareness and Resistance Education program. Yeah, I went through that in 5th grade. It was like this big, huge thing to go through. Like, they were very just say no, and you wore the shirts and all this stuff, and you signed a pledge that you weren't going to do drugs. And
So did you sign the pledge?
oh, yeah. And a few years later, I was smoking weed. Whoopsie. Good times. Okay, to circle back.
Yeah.
What frustrates you most about current cannabis laws?
Well, I think what annoys me is that, I mean, you're going to have, like, for example, there's a couple of things. In the driving space, drug driving, because that's a sort of hot topic. Uh, it annoys me that we only talk about medical cannabis users having the defense, which is fine. I understand that. If you're taking your medicine, you should also have that defense. But there's also a fundamental injustice before that, which is testing for the presence of anything over testing for impairment. So on a justice issue, that annoys me, that not everyone's jumping up and down about the injustice of that. And in terms of drug law reform and cannabis as a whole, I don't like it that we settle for decriminalisation of possession of cannabis, homegrown. Like, that's the push. That's the push. I think in the 100 years of prohibition in this country and around the world has been an abject failure. I know a lot of people do. And lives have been ruined. Millions of people have gone to jail. Families have been torn apart. Jobs lost. So in essence, the government should be apologizing for that. And everyone who's been charged for possession should have their records expunged. So like, that's the end point. And decriminalization, possession of cannabis and home grow is the absolute minimum they can give us.
I love it. I love it. A minimum. I want more.
Yeah.
What is your most memorable courtroom moment?
Oh, when I was a lawyer. Well, luckily I used to settle every case before court.
That's a good thing though, right? Like, if you can
Yeah.
settle out of court, I'm all for it.
Yeah, there was a few criminal matters. Like I was a workers' comp and personal injury lawyer mainly, so a lot of that civil stuff is resolved before court. Um, but sometimes there's some criminal law stuff that I dabbled in, and there was. I remember probably the best moment. As a lawyer, there's a lot of stress, and you're dealing with people who've got, their lives are sort of in a difficult situation. So the best moments are when you achieve a good result for someone who really deserves it. And I guess there was a young fella who lived in homes all his life, and like a ward of the state, and he got charged with a few things, and I remember going and representing him in the children's court and getting him off those charges, and the judge appreciating what this kid had been through, and not sending him to basically juvenile prison, whatever. So those moments in court are the ones that where you get someone, like even if you're helping someone with a small possession charge and they give them a section 10, which is basically I'm pleading guilty and I'm sorry, judge, but the judge is letting you off, and that's often the best case you can do. So I mean, law sucks because you're dealing with justice, and justice is often served through monetary compensation, or in those criminal matters, you're forced to plead guilty to things that you don't think should even be crimes. But you've got to work within the bounds of the system. And if you get a good result for a good client, they're the ones that stick in your memory.
There's no like a few good moment where you're screaming, you can't handle the truth, the whole thing there. No, okay.
No, none of them, sadly. It's a bit boring. A project lawyer, you're just a project manager, managing the experts, managing the client, managing the barrister,
A skill I didn't know you realized, a skill I didn't know you. Why can I not speak today? A skill that I didn't know you needed to be a lawyer.
Yeah, that's the main one, just dragging people along.
Last question. It's a listener submitted question, and it comes from Brandon in Melbourne, Victoria. And I feel like this is a very obvious question to be asking someone like yourself. Will Australia fully legalize cannabis within the next 10 years?
Good question, Brent. I love it. Listen to questions. I feel really special, but I think so. 10 years. I mean, we're a conservative, slow country, but 10 years, you'd have to think 10 years is inevitable. I mean, I probably said that 5 years ago. The road is long and full of changes, but I think inevitably 10 years down the line, surely our government has seen sense and is regulating and taxing and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to believe so. But I mean, I guess I also thought that back in 2016, when we first got access, I was like, oh yeah, man, in 10 years, we'll totally have adult use market. And here we are 10 years later, and I still can't drive.
Yeah, I agree. So you never know, but let's hope so.
Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Well, Miles, thank you very much for playing rapid fire questions with me. I greatly appreciate it. You were wonderful.
Thank you.
Before we dive into things, because you're somebody who worked directly inside of the legal system. And so I think I'd like to start with what kind of first pushed you towards cannabis and drug law reform?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started as a drug law reform advocate because I was a lawyer, and I always had this part of me that was, thought the drug laws were bad and absurd. It didn't really make sense, and that prohibition caused more harm than it solved. So I remember 2013, I emailed this drug law reform organization in Victoria. They were running candidates at the Senate election in 2013. Drug law reform Australia. Greg Chip was the guy who ran it, and he said he needed a candidate for New South Wales for the Senate. So I just jumped on and ran the Senate. We got 2,000 votes or something, 3,000 votes. So that was my first foray into it. And then on the campaign trail, I met Will Tregoning, and we set up this organization, Unharm, which was the sort of following the Ethan Nadelman route, trying to be a charitable organization that was fighting for drug law reform. And then that was his thing. I didn't, he sort of ran with that, and it continues to do a great job, and they're a great organization. And I was the director there for a long time. But I sort of got out of the whole drug law reform scene and had a couple of kids, and then got back into it 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, hang on, I've been working as a lawyer at a union, and the Actors Union, and I wanted to get back into my passion, which is drug law reform. And then spoke to Michael Balderstone in Nimbin, Cannabis. he got me to speak at MardiGrass. I sort of got back into cannabis through trying to join the legalized cannabis party and trying to be an advocate and a candidate and that sort of thing. So I ran for the Senate last year again for the legalized cannabis party. So it sort of started drug law reform and then has ended in cannabis because the cannabis party is a functioning entity and cannabis is sort of the forefront of drug law reform in essence. It's the you need to if we're going to change the laws and decriminalize and move towards legalization model. I mean, cannabis is the obvious candidate, right, as a lower risk drug which has health benefits and all that sort of stuff, and is being trialed across the world. And then my theory is that each drug you need to have a different system and different rules and regulations around. But cannabis is sort of like that, the trial. Let's see how that goes. And we've got heaps of data now from across the world. So it's not really just into the wilderness anymore. We can actually look at other jurisdictions and model and do the best model.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely more and more data out there that says that the sky doesn't come caving in if you move towards an adult use market.
Yep, exactly. I think it's fascinating. I mean, there's still people, you get caught up in all the media, all the information that has spread about cannabis, and there are negative, situations that arise for, young people, or there can be problems and that sort of thing. But it's interesting. We don't know how it works in this country with an adult use market. And I always think that prohibition causes more problems, and that's pretty uncontroversial. Prohibition of alcohol causes so much more harm. So really, it's likely if you go into an adult use market here, you're going to reduce some of those harms. You're going to allow, instead of allowing everyone to just buy whatever weed they can access, hydroponic, all that sort of stuff, you do create this system of knowledge and places where you can go and shop and talk to someone and know about the dose and know when to use it and test what sort of, do you want, the sativa or the indica, so you get more knowledge, and therefore more knowledge, more information, better education, then you reduce harm. So it's going to be, it's the opposite. Ironically, you're going to have, if you do move to that market, you will actually get better relationship between society and cannabis.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. Did you, when you first kind of moved into this space, did you find it difficult to be publicly outspoken about cannabis reform, or was that just something natural for you?
Wow, that's interesting. In 2013, I came out. I forgot to say that I came out on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald as a drug taking lawyer. So there's a picture of me on the front page into it sometime, and I didn't know I was on the front page. I just did an interview about drug law reform and took a photo, and then I talked about it, my own use. And then I think the quote is like, "Lawyer, I've used drugs, many drugs, most," or something, and then I list them all. And then the front page, and my mum didn't know. She got the Herald that morning, paper in the morning, and saw it and was like shocked, and called my sister. Oh, and he's like, Miles, and my sister thought something happened to me. And then my best mate was my boss. We ran a law firm together. That was his, and he sort of get pressure to sort of, that might affect the firm, but he stood by me, which was good. And then all our website was searched the most that day because all the other lawyers were searching me. So I got a bit of infamy in the law world. But most legal people are sort of advocates for better laws, and most lawyers and barristers support drug law reform as well. So that wasn't an issue. But that was, interestingly, I was in my 20s then. And then when I came out as the legalized cannabis candidate 3 or 4 years ago, I was suddenly in my early 40s, just turned 40, say. And then I had young kids and we just moved to a regional town, and the kids were going to school, and I didn't really know anyone. And all my friends at home know, we all know what drugs we've used and how we use cannabis together. So there's less stigma there. So that was more challenging, I think, coming out, hoping your kids don't get treated differently in a small town. You don't know people, they don't know you, and then suddenly you're at the booths with the legalized cannabis t-shirt on. That was a bigger challenge than it was coming out on the front page, I reckon.
Let's talk about that for a second, right? Because that's an impact on you personally and how it's affected you personally. I mean, and kind of beyond you, you're talking about, well, what are my kids, how are my kids going to be treated? Did that because I do wonder, because I've got I mean, he's a teenager now, right? But I do wonder on some level, the more I turn on the mic, the more I get active in what I'm doing and pushing back. And I do wonder, what the fallout is to my kid and how it will affect him down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and I was listening to Kind of Curious, Kyla's podcast, and she talks to her daughter about that, right?
Yeah, Kyla and her daughter.
Kyla, they,
I've forgotten her daughter's name and I feel horrible. But yeah, that's a great episode too. You it's easy on some level to turn on the mic and start to talk.
Mm.
But sometimes as you're talking, you don't realize, well, what's the fallout to what I'm saying? Even though you're passionate about it and even though you care about it and you feel like whatever you're saying is, I don't want to be like, you feel like it's right, but you're passionate about it, right? And I do on some level wonder, like, is my passion muddying my kids' water, so to speak?
Well, yeah, I think history will absolve us, to use a Fidel Castro phrase. Um, like in the future, cannabis will be part of our lives and regulated, and everyone will see. So like, I think that's a positive. I think we're moving to, with medical cannabis and things, people are starting to see the health benefits and the benefits to, and as Ethan Nadelman says, once everyone knows someone who's taking medical cannabis, then you get the tipping point and you get to legalization. So, and with more and more older people using medical cannabis, those stigmas are breaking down. But I think a lot of it was in my head, was worry about what people thought, worry about how my kids are going to be treated. But since, it took me a while to come out and tell people, because I'd never told them and things like that about this side of me. But now, whenever you go to Nimb and MardiGrass and you see all these people and it inspires you, and then you talk to people like yourself and you realize we're part of a good community here, and these people, people like we genuinely trying to make the world better and make have a better relationship with cannabis for our society. And I think that talking now to everyone in the community here, when I open up and just be myself and tell them, most people are pretty supportive, and a lot of people come out, and it's funny. Like I was telling someone at my daughter's netball the other day. I was just up at Nimbin, and then he was like, "Oh, I grow my own. I make cookies." And then I've found so many conversations starts. So many people don't talk about it and hide it away. And then if you actively talk about it, then they can open up to you about it. Or people say my parents were growing it, or things like that. Or, I use it now for my back pain every morning, CBD oil or THC to sleep. And you realize, there is a bigger, it's bigger, and it's good to be, and it's good to be brave. I think it makes you feel good if you're brave about these things. So but I agree. I hope I think most people don't judge the sins of their parents, in essence, their kids. So I think they'll be fine. But I'm sure that in the future they'll Google us and see these things, and there might be some comments between them at school and things.
I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'm hoping in, 20 years we can look back and think, well, I was on the right side of the law, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about MardiGrass for just a bit, because this year was my first year to go. Wow, just wow. I think the biggest thing that I was blown away by was just the overall endurance of the people that just keep showing up, right?
Yeah.
They just keep showing up and they keep talking, and kind of like what you're saying, these are people that as you talk to them, you realize they're just average, regular people just trying to get some sort of quality of life back, or they're just trying to help somebody else get a quality of life back. They're just trying to help on some level. And I think it was very refreshing, because sometimes you do get stuck in the, like you were saying earlier, the negative spin the media gives, that it's important to have things like Mardi Gras so you can go and you can talk to people and you can be reminded about why I guess you got involved in the first place.
Yeah, agree. And on that last point we were talking about before, with the stigma and stuff, I think that you see a lot at those events, you see the advocates who have been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years, and they had it a lot tougher than we have. Like it's much more socially acceptable to be a cannabis advocate now than it probably was in the 90s, so in Australia. So that's cool. So it's cool to see those people and see their commitment to the cause, and how, you're building on their legacy. And they were fighting a battle that was a lot harder, and they contributed to the cracks that are helping us now. But yeah, I agree. Like you get up there and you see, and it inspires you. It gives you a boost of energy, and talking to all these people about cannabis and seeing all the benefits. And I think it's just fun. Like you got to remember, if you've had prohibition and 100 years of criminalization and people being charged and going to jail and lives ruined, it's such a negative from something that should never have been, that we should never have criminalized this plant in the first place. So it's good to have joy again and enjoy it and celebrate the plan and the good things about it, and try, like I think, like the MardiGrass for the gay and lesbian community has, that was really important for joy and to a stigmatized group, right? And to show a celebration, for LGBTQ and all that. There was that party was really important to law reform and to pride in the movement and that sort of thing. That's from looking in. So, like, I think MardiGrass is similar. It's like to get rid of stigma, we have to sort of almost find joy and pride, and not be stigmatized. Be on the forefront and say no. Like, let's celebrate this plan. Yes, there's laws. Yes, we've got to reduce harm. Yes, we want to make it safe and ethical and positive and all that stuff thing. But we can also celebrate a plant that's been maligned, and also helpfully help remove stigma to people that have been unjustly criminalized and stigmatized.
How much of prohibition do you think is driven by stigma versus science?
Oh, I think it's all. I mean, if you look back historically to the origins of criminalization, I mean, there's a combination there of racist laws trying to attack African Americans, attacking creatives, hippies, jazz musicians. Um, there's a commercial interests of DuPont and plastics and the cotton industry, and the old school billionaires like like Randolph Hearst, who propagated the cannabis reefer madness myths and things like that. So unfortunately, prohibition came from a bad place in essence. I don't think everyone who criminalized cannabis came from a bad place. I think a lot of people probably got on board with, abstinence and temperance and all that sort of thing. And there was probably a societal and religious aspect to that as well. But generally, I think it came from a flawed position and never should have been. And then you have that sort of information fed to people over a long period of time, and it's easy to get caught up in that stigma. So I don't think there was much science behind it. Sometimes they use science to fit the propaganda, right?
Yeah, I've said it on another podcast that I think wholeheartedly that prohibition came about from propaganda, not because of the science. There was no science there that said, hey, cannabis is a horrible drug. Hey, cannabis is going to ruin your life. Hey, cannabis is going to, cause an overdose, death. Hey, cannabis is going to cause you to whatever it is that we're still hung up on. There wasn't the science there back in the 1920s, right? Like when you go back all the way back, people have been consuming cannabis for a very long time for a lot of different ailments. It's just all of a sudden, somewhere in the States, they decided, nope, we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. And then, I mean, if you look at harm to the individual user and the harm to society, I mean, alcohol far outweighs everything. So the science would be there to prohibit alcohol, and that was a abject failure. And no one realistically says, let's prohibit alcohol anymore, even though that causes the most harm. So yeah, agreed. 100%.
Why do you think Australia still criminalizes people for cannabis in 2026?
I just think the government hasn't got the courage to make the decision. I think everyone's on board now with cannabis. Like, I think a lot of, there's statistics out there saying something like 78% of people support decriminalization of some form in this country. More than, I think it's 56% support legalization, which would be like your regulated market. Probably only going to grow over time. So you've got the critical mass behind it. And then, I mean, whether there's interest groups now who don't want it to happen, whether, whether alcohol industry doesn't want to see it, or medical cannabis is happy to keep it in their area. I'm not sure. I don't want to make those 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 comment or accusations because I'm not 100% sure, and and I appreciate everyone's sort of in commercially have their interests and those sort of things, but I don't think those interest groups are too pronounced, and I don't think they're too in the way of cannabis because I think that everyone can see that the world can function with cannabis, and those industries will be fine as well with a recreational market. But I think it's political will, and I think politicians don't want to be the one to make the call. I think they don't want to be the one who makes that judgment. So kudos to those politicians around the world who make those calls, because there is a loud minority of people who will go on shock jocks or radio who may write negative things about cannabis and might jump up and down and blame the government, and the government might be scared of what happens. So I think it takes courage. I think that's why I think maybe potentially you need to do ballots like they did in the States, in California and things, ballots, plebiscites, citizens assembly. If politicians are too scared to make the call, give it to the people to make the call. That's what I would suggest.
You raised a really good point, though, right? Like, I do think a lot of politicians probably privately agree to some sort of legalization. And they're just, like you're saying, they're just afraid to publicly admit that. On some level, I think that's probably, and I'm going to make a bold statement. I think I have a media background, right? So for the listeners that don't know, in North America, I worked in television, radio, and print. So I have an extensive background in radio. I'm sorry, in media. And so I do think that the media plays a huge role in how the public perceives something. And I think right now they're too hung up with fear mongering. They're too hung up with the negative stories. It's like, we absolutely do have something in the media called if it bleeds, it leads, right? And so it's very easy to grab shitty stories and put them out. Like we were saying at the beginning, you made some admissions on some drug use or whatever it was, and the city, was it the Sydney Morning Herald? You said, yeah. They took that, they put your picture up, and was like, your mom is like picking up the newspaper, and she's like, holy shit, what is my kid doing? And you're like, whoa, it's not it's not like that. But the media, I feel here, is very one-sided, and I don't feel like they're doing their job by evening out the coverage, by showing the good, by talking to the patients that are out of bed now because they're not bedridden because they're so high on opiates all the time, or whatever it is. Those, like the guy that again had the sore back but now doesn't have the sore back so he can go to work. I mean, they're not balancing out their coverage, and I think if politicians stood up more and were more willing to talk about it in a positive light, it would force the media to change the narrative. And if the media changed the narrative, well, then it would come back to, well, now the public discourse has changed, and now all of a sudden, well, we can move forward for real reform in this country.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the status quo is sometimes just talking from that harm reduction rather than the positives, right? So sharing the positive stories is definitely a benefit, and they're not getting caught up on like one tragic incident. Like someone takes a drug and has a bad experience, and there's a tragic end. I mean, you can always raise that with any situation, one or whatever it is. But like you got to look at the overall benefit, risk, reward, those sort of things across society. I mean, there's risk reward for driving cars, for fishing off rocks, riding horses, whatever it is. There's always going to be tragic incidences and people dying and things in sports and things, but you don't realistically stop them. So you got to look at it a more holistic approach rather than grabbing hold of like the emotive story, which can seem like which can sort of stifle any change, even though change is more beneficial as a whole. And there's a utilitarian perspective to these things, the greatest good for the greatest number of people, really.
Yeah. I mean, harm reduction is a very broad concept, if you will. Like, a while ago, Queensland was doing pill testing, right? We started doing pill testing out at festivals, and I don't care what anybody says, pill testing saves lives. I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, me too.
But now all of a sudden we've had a change in government, and now our government no, we're not spending money on pill testing, right? And it's like, well, but why? There was no science there that told you the pill testing wasn't working. There was nothing there that said that this was a bad program. They're just stuck in old conservative ways, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, no, I think people should call them out on that. You are literally choosing to make a law to remove something that helps create safety just for pigheadedness, just for stubborn policy reasons, because you want to look tough on drugs. You prefer to risk young people's lives at festivals. You literally could be responsible for people dying if you're taking away harm reduction strategy, because people can go to a festival, get their drugs tested, and if it's too strong or if there's some contaminant in there, some dangerous nitazene or fentanyl, they could throw away that thing, their life could be saved. Now that should always be that should be the only consideration. So I agree, that's absurd. And and I hate that. You would think that a good harm reduction strategy, like it has been happened in New South Wales with the injecting centre, it stayed there for 20 years and no government has got rid of it. That's great to hear. I wish they were all like that. And it's very sad to see the pill testing get up in Queensland and the government removes it. And, in 2004 in WA, they decriminalised cannabis, right? The Gallop government. And then the next election they won and it stayed. But then the coalition government got in 2 elections later and cancelled it. So a part of me thinks the only way you're going to get guaranteed cannabis reform long term is if it's legalized and you have a regulated market, because then the governments will get addicted to the tax coming in. So federally, I think you almost want the federal government to legalize, get their $2.5 billion a year in tax, and then no one's going to change it because they need that money.
Yeah, I got to agree. I think the government's passing the buck when they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to leave it up to the states. We're going to this, we're going to that. No, that's passing the buck. If you're going to give us medicinal cannabis and you're going to legalize it on a federal level, why don't we have federal framework for it? Why, as a patient, am I always so damn confused with what's going on? If I'm in WA, am I allowed 30 grams? If I'm in Queensland, do I get 60 grams? If I'm in Tasmania, can I get a doctor from the NT to prescribe? Why is it so hard? I don't. Again, if we're going to legalize it federally to say, okay, this is a medicine that you can access federally, why can't the government step up, come to the table and be like, okay, let's give it a federal framework?
They should, yes, I agree. And that's where the excise or the tax would come federally. They've got to deal with the UN conventions of federal. So it makes sense. I mean, they send it to the states because the criminal laws are within each state. So, I mean, you can decriminalize state by state, but yeah, I think like they've done in ACT. But yeah, I think a holistic approach would be better.
You raise an excellent point. In the ACT, I can grow plants in the ACT. I can walk around with small amounts in the ACT. Well, why? Why can I do it there and not in New South Wales? Because there's an arbitrary line there that tells me plants grow on this side of the line, but not that side of the line.
You should have a plant in the middle, and half of it's legal, half of it not.
I gotta be honest. There's a huge part of me that's like, I don't know. Maybe I'll move to the ACT for the summer and just do I'm growing a plant in my own backyard. It's perfectly legal.
Jeremy Buckingham, the MP for New South Wales for the Legalised Cannabis Party, he's done some videos of growing cannabis in ACT.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. You can't stop me from doing that, but yet I still can't drive a car. You know what I mean?
That's why we're fighting to change it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's why we turn on the mic. It's why we show up.
Yeah.
What does reform realistically look like? Because you and I can pipe dream it out to the day we die, but what does it realistically look like over the next decade?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be, that's the ideal, what we talked about, a federal, decision, but I don't think I'd be surprised. You'd have to have a reformist, a Whitlam type come and do that. But I think, it'll just stumble along state by state, changing. Some, I would hope a state will decriminalise. I mean, New South Wales government, you would think and the Victorian government have both talked about decriminalisation, and the state Labor government, you would hope in this country would, the state of New South Wales where I live, would decriminalise in the next 5 years the possession and growing say up to 50 grams and 5 or 6 plants or something. I would like ACT, that model. I think that would be a realistic possibility. But then also it might not happen. And drug driving laws will continue to adapt. And I assume at some point there'll be an impairment test that is developed somewhere, which is everyone accepts. And then harm reduction, pill testing, I think, things like that will continue to ebb and flow. And it's always a slow sort of change. Things have changed in the 13 years since I started in drug law reform. They've got, we have medicinal cannabis, and harm reduction and things is more of an accepted proposition. But things, they don't happen linearly. They sort of go up and down. And as you say, they change with governments. And Queensland, who knows what's going to happen in Queensland? I don't think they'll be decriminalising anytime soon, unfortunately.
Oh, man, Queensland, I wish, right? Like, we're an odd bird up here. We really are. I believe that Australia could have a meaningful hemp and cannabis industry. I genuinely do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hope so. Like that's that's what we talk about a lot in the legalized cannabis parties. Like two industries, recreational cannabis market with the potential, Canada make $2.5 billion a year in excise, and you're probably saving a couple of billion a year in police resources and court and things like that. So that's an obvious economic benefit, as well as the arguments in terms of justice and morality and things like that that we raise as cannabis activists. And then the hemp market, I agree. I'm learning a lot about hemp, but it seems like there's a lot of benefits and potential benefits, and to so many different industries. And it could be this super plant that helps save us from ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. There's a whole bunch of economic opportunities we're missing out on.
Yeah. I mean, there's places like Hunter Valley where coal's that's going to run out at some point, or that's going to cease as an industry or decline. And then you could turn those into hemp hubs where, the hemp plant can actually help clear some of the poisons that have got into the earth from the mining. And you could create a whole new industry for a place that needs an industry. And, Australia could have the potential to be a hemp capital of the world, but with our room and our growing capacities and things. But what Australia was when I was a kid in the 80s, Australia was a leader in solar energy. We were the first to have these solar cars racing across the desert. And then our politics got in the way, and now we're trying to catch up. So I'd like to be hopeful, and I hope, I hope that we're in a time where the people can see those and the necessary need for new technologies and hemp being such a versatile and useful product, like hempcrete, the way it can be fire resistant as a building material. And I went into these hempcrete homes are so amazing. You go in there, they're really cool in summer, and like, wow, I'd love to be able to make my own hempcrete home one day.
Yeah, I was actually just learning about that at the MardiGrass about how it is. It's fire. Like, I'm like, why aren't we building more houses out of this if it's fire retardant? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we are a country that deals with fire on a regular basis, and if we could literally be building houses that were fireproof, it seems like a no-brainer.
You'd think the government and the insurance companies would be thinking about the costs that they now pay out every 5 years when there's a huge bushfire, thinking, hang on, why don't we put some of those money into investing into short-termism? It's a challenge, but yeah, we'll get there, hopefully.
We will. We will.
We'll stay positive. We're going to get there. Hemp, yeah. I mean, and we, more people are talking about hemp, and we're learning about it. I'm learning about it. So obviously, it takes early adopters, and things take time to become mainstream. But the more people learn about it and hear about it, the more people will be interested, and the more hemp capacity, options there are, but obviously money helps. So government investment is important in those things.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree, sir. What keeps you optimistic?
Well, drug law reform can get you down because it takes a long time, right? It's a one step forward, two steps back. You get medical cannabis, then they start prohibiting driving and things, So it's that's a challenge. But I just genuinely think, as we said before, we'll be on the right side of history. This is going to be really important. I sometimes talk on the campaign trail about how cannabis it's a revolutionary plant. Hemp and cannabis, the new industries, revolution. They can change healthcare, can change our, building our plastic. You could create biodegradable plastic. So we're talking about a world in which we're facing, issues with our environment and plastics everywhere, microplastics and health problems and anxiety issues from digital world and things like that. So cannabis has the potential to be a plant that saves us from ourselves and saves the environment and does so many positive things, and that's needed now. So that gives me hope. But we need change, and this can be part of that change. This movement, and it's sort of like a back to plant movement. I think the cannabis legalization movement and is more than just legalization. It's maybe we should be working better with plant medicines. We should be using psychedelics more for treatment of mental health conditions. We should be working with these plant medicines creatively, spiritually, and all these sort of things. And we should be using more sustainable fabrics and biodegradable fuels and biodegradable plastics and fuels and things and hempcrete. And that all ties into this movement of reconnecting with the natural way in the nature. And I think we need it. And so that's exciting, I think.
I think that is super exciting because, if prohibition ends tomorrow, that's a whole list of things that could change in Australia just beyond cannabis itself, right? Like, it's a long list of things that could change if we just, adjusted our what's the word I'm searching for? Our
yeah, I don't
our mindset on things, right?
Yeah, just think a bit differently on it. Think creatively on this issue, and we could end up in a way better position. Our futures could be brighter, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, sir. There's a lot of potential there. We just need a couple of crazy people to be the first to push it forward.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. Who's going to be which come on, if you're listening out there, come on. Political parties, let's be courageous.
I think it'll happen. I think it's just it's like we were saying at the very beginning there, what Ethan was talking about. We will get to a tipping point in this country where we all know somebody who has welcomed medicinal cannabis into their life and it's improved their life somehow.
Yeah, 100%.
We will get to that point, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And like everyone, nearly 90% of the people I have social interactions with support reform with cannabis. So that's nice. Everyone if everyone's starting to get on board, well, eventually the politicians will have to follow. The parliaments, I should say, will have to make, eventually if enough people keep fighting and pushing and keep saying it, then eventually they'll have to make that change. You can't resist forever.
It's true. It's true, right? It's absolutely true. Miles, it's been an absolute pleasure chit-chatting it with you today. I mean, we've covered a lot of topics. I'll be honest, you're my first politician I've had on.
Well, I'm not a politician yet. I'm an advocate. If I get elected, I'm only become a politician if I get elected, right?
No, fair. Well, you're the first, political candidate? Because you've thrown your name in. You're in the political stratosphere. Let me put it to that way.
Yeah. And hopefully, can be elected at some point in the future. That would be nice, I think.
Yeah, fingers crossed, sir. Fingers crossed. Before I let you go, where can people follow your work or support what you're doing or keep up to date?
I guess Facebook or Instagram, Miles Hunt, Senate candidate, I think, or Senate candidate or Cannabis Advocate, I think that's now on Facebook. But yeah, I mean, we do put some good videos up of MardiGrass in Nimbin showing that celebration and those sort of things. So, that's probably the best place.
I love it. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
No worries. I love it. The good work on the Oz Cannabis reviews is really great to have you part of the movement and contributing in your way.
It's a good fight, sir. Got to be a part of the good fight.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me. It was awesome. I really enjoyed the chat. Good on you.
Yeah.
See you at the next event, hopefully, wherever that is.
For sure, sir. And that's a wrap for my conversation with Miles. And honestly, I feel like this is one of those chats that really highlights just how complex this space in Australia still is. We're not just talking about cannabis, we're talking about justice, stigma, policy, and real people trying to live better lives. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from this conversation is just how fine that line is between advocating for something you genuinely believe in and being misunderstood for it. Whether that's as a parent, a patient, or someone just speaking up. It's not always easy, but conversations like this are how we start to shift that narrative. Because the reality is, more and more people are being impacted by these laws every single day. More people are finding relief through cannabis, and yet we're still debating things like driving laws that don't make sense, inconsistent rules across states, and a media landscape that isn't always telling the full story. But at the same time, there is progress. It might be slow, it might be messy, but it is happening. So if you take anything away from this episode, let it be this. Keep asking questions, keep having conversations, and don't be afraid to speak up, because that's how change happens. As always, if this show resonated with you, it would mean a lot if you left a 5-star review or shared it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you'd like to support independent cannabis education and patient advocacy here in Australia, you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/AusCannaPodcast. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, always ask for what you deserve, because silence rarely brings opportunity.